Hi, my name is Rachel Shellstrom. I am in Intro to Media Studies class, and today I'm going to be talking to you about media bias, patterns of media bias, standards of journalism, and I'm going to be doing that through 3 articles that I have picked today, and all 3 articles are about the recent Brett Kavanaugh case, him being accused of sexual assault against Ford, and this is also something I was very interested into looking in and seeing how the left viewed it, how the right viewed it, and seeing how the middle viewed it as well. Looking at biases of this case and looking deeper into it, so hopefully I can highlight those today and we can go into further detail about Brett Kavanaugh case and the bias that has come from this, because it is a big deal. Just happened, I think it was last week or the week before, that Kavanaugh was actually confirmed to be a justice. So this is fairly recent, and let's get to exploring. So today I picked 3 articles, like I said before. I picked one from the very right, so conservative. I picked one from the middle, so hopefully it doesn't show liberal or conservative, really just shows middle and factual information. Then I also picked one from the very left side, so very liberal, skewing that way. So to start off, the very right article I picked, the very conservative one, was from the Federalist. And I picked this because on the spectrum that we have been given to look at for media bias, it was on the very right side, and it showed that the Federalist expressly promotes its views, so its conservative views, and is very selective and incomplete, so doesn't usually tend to show anything but its beliefs, its views, its bias. So you won't be seeing very many liberal ideas in the Federalist. So the article I picked from the Federalist was written by Chris Murray. It was published on October 17th, so pretty recent, either today or yesterday. My memory's a little foggy on what the date is today, but the article I picked is called "Why Brett Kavanaugh Should Sue Christine Blasey Ford for Defamation." So automatically from the title, we can see that this article is in favor of Brett Kavanaugh's side, and it is against Ford and the sexual assault that she claims to have had and the case that she was pushing for. So some patterns I saw was I saw bias by story selection, I saw bias by spin, I saw labeling, media bias by labeling, and just kind of going off of what these mean, I saw in the article a lot of times they were labeling Ford's conduct as clearly criminal, and it was interesting to see because they actually highlighted her being stated as clearly criminal in red. So it made it really stand out in the article, and you could really tell what they were trying to portray, because they obviously wanted you to read that her views and her conduct were clearly criminal. So also bias by story selection, they also in the article picked other cases that were the same story as the Brett Kavanaugh case. They picked cases where also a girl was filing sexual assault against someone who was in the government, and that the evidence wasn't there. So it was just very interesting to see they were selecting these specific sources, selecting these specific stories in order to push for their own opinion, which is conservative, as we can tell from not only the article name, but we can also see from how they spoke in the cases that they used to portray their point. So they also labeled Republicans as fair. In the article, there wasn't any labeling that I could see where they labeled Democrats as being harsh or labeling them as bad, but I did recognize that they were labeling Republicans as fair and just and very just pro-conservative. So unfortunately, this article for me did fall to bias because of the way it was titled, of the way there was bias by selection, bias by labeling, bias by spin, and you could just really tell that the story that they were trying to portray only had one interpretation of the event. So that is bias by spin. You could really see that they had the set interpretation that Kavanaugh was right, he didn't do this action, and that Ford was clearly criminal, as they put it directly in the article. So this one did fall to bias. The next article that I want to go over is from the middle. So it's from USA Today. And the article I picked for this is from Margot Cleveland, and she published this on October 8th, so about a week or two ago, so very close with the one that I talked about previously, which was October 17th, and this is also about the Kavanaugh case, and it's called "Democrats Have Unleashed a Red Wave of Brett Kavanaugh Believing Women Voters." So, I picked USA Today because I was hopefully looking for something from the middle with no bias, where there wasn't a publisher that was leaning towards liberal or conservative. I wanted to see the facts and see what the middle opinion was. So, according to the bias chart that puts all the different companies on the spectrum of bias, USA Today is in the smack dab in the middle, and it's known for being mainstream and fact reporting. So, the USA Today article that I looked at, it really called out the sides on their bias. It really called out the Democrats on how they used this case to promote the Me Too movement and kind of provoke women to advocate for women's rights. And it really just stated facts, and I really appreciate that in the article. It just really stated factual information, and you knew it was like you were looking directly at the case and you weren't hearing outside opinions, you weren't hearing bias. Someone who wants to know what this case is about, I really think that they should look at this article because it doesn't say anything but the facts and what actually happened. So, and I appreciate how it called out both the right side and the left side on their labeling and their bias. It said that, like I said before, it called out Democrats on how they were using this as a movement instead of like really focusing on the case, really focusing on the people in it and promoting justice for what was happening. The only patterns that I could see were maybe media bias by commission, but it really just depends on where you stand. Media or bias by commission is alluding or asserting unsupported statements or uncorrected errors that are generally accepted as fact by certain groups. So I could see someone who's very left getting angry at this article and saying that's fake news because it did call out the liberals on using this case to their advantage and Democrats using this to their advantage as a movement, as supporting the women's rights movement and the Me Too movement. So I would see, or I can see how liberals and very far left-leaning people would see this as media bias by commission. So it really just depends on where you stand. But I don't think that they were intentionally being biased. I really believe that they were just stating facts and kind of seeing what was going on inside the case. So in my opinion, this does meet the standards of journalism, and I think that is very important because a lot of articles, especially when I was looking over articles for this case, do not meet the standards of journalism. And I think this meets the standards of journalism because it is very factual. It tells the truth. There's verification. It opens up and sees the public's opinion. Is very comprehensive and proportional. So I really think that this upholds to the standards of journalism. The last article I have is an article from the Huffington Post. So we looked at the right side, we looked at the middle, and now let's look at the left. So the very left articles I have from the Huffington Post, and they are left. They are about the same level as the Federalist, but just on the opposite side. So they are expressly promoting liberal views, and they are selective and incomplete. A lot of story-driven articles as well. So whatever their side believes in, they will often promote and put in their articles. So the article that I selected to talk about that was very left from the Huffington Post was written by Emily Peck, published by her, and it was published on September 27th. So all these within 3 weeks of each other, like I mentioned, and it's called "Brett Kavanaugh Plays the Victim." So automatically from the article's title, I knew that I wanted to select this one because I could tell by the left leaning or left skewing it was doing. I could see automatically when I looked up the article, the very front picture of it was a picture of Kavanaugh at a face where he looked like he was like doing a poor me expression. Like you could, I don't know, it was just a picture that you could tell that they used to make people feel that Kavanaugh wanted people to feel guilty for him. And automatically I knew that that was biased because they could have picked a happy picture of him, they could have picked an actual photo, but no, they instead picked a picture from when he was in the court, when he was acting like the victim, like they stated. So another indication that this article had bias was it only talks against Brett Kavanaugh. It only displays him as the victim, or him playing the victim. It kind of shows him like saying, oh, poor me. So they're going against Kavanaugh and supporting Ford without being directly about it, but just by having the title plays the victim. He's playing it, he's not actually the victim, like he's doing the poor me card. So as we can tell just from the title, from the front picture that they have, you can tell that this is leaning very left. So the patterns of media bias that I was able to identify was bias by labeling, when only one ideological view is given, an extreme label. So they were labeling the conservative side, they were labeling Brett Kavanaugh as poor me, he's playing the victim. They also mentioned that he was an aggravated victim, so they went against him and lashed out against him by saying that he was crying, pretending to cry, playing the victim card, doing the poor me thing. So this was bias by labeling. And I also recognized bias by spin, and I knew this because there's only a liberal interpretation of this. There's no conservative, there's no middle ground. You can tell there's bias by spin because there's only the liberal interpretation of this case. There's also bias by omission because it left out the right side, it left out the middle. It only was focused on the left side, the liberal side. So in my opinion, this does fall to bias. It does fall to media bias because of bias by labeling, bias by spin, bias by omission, just by looking at the picture of Kavanaugh not at his best state, as it looks like he's playing the poor me card. In the article title, you could just really tell that this does fall to media bias. So when comparing and contrasting all of these three articles that I got from different parts of the bias spectrum, you could really tell that the left side and the right side had completely different views. So the very right side was against Ford, and the very left side was against Kavanaugh. And by the articles that were on the right side, such as the Federalist, and the articles on the left side, like the Huffington Post that I used, you could tell that you either attack the side that you're against and support the one that you want. So both sides either attacked Ford or attacked Kavanaugh. There wasn't any middle, it was either black and white. You hate one, like the other, hate one, like the other. So you could just really tell by the titles, the sides' views, and how they really weren't open to much other opinion. But in the middle, you could really see the facts, and you could really get a better understanding. So I hope that people can become more open to looking at the middle picture. I know by looking at these articles today for our project that I can really tell now what bias does and the pictures and the meanings that it really tries to portray. So I hope now on I will be able to try to focus my attention on articles and companies like USA Today that are really fact-driven, because I feel like those are very informational and they really give you the true story. So above all, you can really just see how on the spectrum, how they really are far apart and how they all tell different sides of the story, and that's why it's really important to look at the middle. And although that all three of these did cover the Brett Kavanaugh case, they are very different in opinion, and unfortunately bias gets a hold of what's within the article, and it really just shows how important it is to look at middle and try not to be biased. So thank you for this opportunity. I had a lot of fun looking